the record button now. So, yep, that is recording. Okay, and I think we shall get started. Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is Chris Stanway, and I am a careers advisor with the Employability Programs team. And joining me today in the background there is Janet Jensen, who is the manager of the Employability Programs team. So to begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on, and I'm joining you from Dja Dja Wurrung country, and I pay my respect to Indigenous elders, past and present, and I extend that respect to any First Nations people joining us today. Okay, so in today's workshop, we're going to start off by taking just a really brief look at the steps involved in preparing your application. So we'll go over some of the key points with the match process. We won't go into a lot of detail, but we'll just touch on some of the main elements of that. And then we're going to focus specifically on how to create tailored resumes and cover letters for healthcare roles, and particularly for the graduate nurse and midwifery programs. And then we'll have time at the end for some questions. And of course, you can also pop questions you may have about, resumes and cover letters in the chat. But if you have more detailed questions about the match process itself, then, I strongly recommend that you visit the GNMP website, where you'll find lots of useful information. And there's also, an FAQs page where you'll find answers to, I'm sure, a lot of your questions. And then if you're still sort of, wondering, or if you're still unsure about some aspects of the match process, then certainly I would encourage you to, reach out to your lecturers for clarification. Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping. As I said, if you could keep your microphones on mute during the presentation, you're welcome to leave your cameras on. As I said, the session is being recorded, so anyone who has registered for today's workshop will receive a link to the recording, and we'll also send you a copy of the PowerPoint slides. So we'll do that tomorrow. And just so you know, your attendance today will go towards the Career Ready Advantage Award as a professional learning activity. So that will automatically be recorded as that activity. And can you also please complete the attendance form so that you do get a copy of the resources? And also we'll ask you to complete a really short feedback form at the end of the session. Okay, so to start with, I thought we'd just sort of have a look very briefly at what you need to do to prepare your applications. So first of all, make sure that you read the candidate handbook as well as the code of conduct. So your lecturers may have already sort of covered this. On the website, you'll find key information. On the GNMP website, you'll find key information about the match process and the timeline, including, when the match opens and when it closes, when you need to register, when you need to list your preferences, also when you need to apply to the individual health services, and also when you need to complete your online interview. So, it's a really good idea if you mark all of the key dates in your calendar, and also contact your referees as soon as possible, because it's important that, one, you ask their permission, and two, you give them enough time to complete the report. And also you need to check whether they're going to be available to complete the reports during the designated time period. And then, of course, make sure that your resume is up to date. So don't just sort of leave this till the last minute, because it does take time. And just remember that you do need to submit your resume to each of the health services in your preference list. And then, of course, last but not least, make sure that you research the health services, so the individual health services that you're interested in applying to, and make sure that you research their specific programs. So remember that, health services have different programs on offer. So it's important that you explore those. So when the match opens on the 2nd of June, you need to create an account on the GNMP website, and you need to complete the online application components. So in addition to this, and remember it's a two-step process, in addition to doing the registration and then completing the online stuff, you also need to apply to the health services that are in your preference list. And I know in the past, sometimes students have been a bit confused by this. So you do need to apply through their websites, and you'll find the links to these in the health services directory that's on the GNMP website. And candidates need to submit a resume and any other information that's requested by the health service. So, make sure that you familiarise yourself with their application process. And also you may need to submit a cover letter, but this isn't, if it's requested by the health service. So some may only request a resume, whereas others may request the resume and the cover letter. So just remember that applications need to be submitted both to PMCB and the health services in your preference list. Otherwise, it's not a valid application. And then also at the scheduled times, you'll need to complete an online video interview. So we're not going to go into that today because we'll be running a workshop next week, which will, go over how to prepare and what's involved in the online videos or video interviews, and also how to prepare for interviews with individual health services if you need to do that as well. Okay, so as I've just mentioned, please make sure that you research each of the health services before you apply. So visit their website to learn about, the services they have, their departments, their values, and any specialist programs they have. And also make sure that you understand their application process. And of course, research each of the programs themselves. So keep in mind that not all health services offer the same programs. So it's up to you to gather as much information as possible and focus on, the key details like the program's aims, their intake dates, their duration, their structure, the number of rotations they have, and also their scheduled information sessions. And the health services directory is where you'll find information about each of the health services who are participating in the match. So this includes information like, the contact details of the program coordinator or the manager, the number of roles that are on offer, the closing date for applications, a link to their website, and also intake information. And it's a good idea to pop those dates that information sessions are running into your calendar. So if you can, try to attend these sessions to learn more about, the specific programs. And also it gives you the opportunity to, ask any questions you may have, as well as, the opportunity to meet the program coordinators. Okay, so now we've covered that part of the match process. We're going to now look specifically at, some strategies to help you tailor your resumes and cover letters for healthcare roles. So when you're preparing your application documents, it's important to understand that, employers are, seeking answers to three key questions. So firstly, what they want to know is whether you can do the job. So do you have, the necessary skills, the knowledge, and the experience to perform well in the role? Secondly, they want to know whether you actually will do the job. So, are you genuinely motivated, and will you approach the job with the right attitude and also the right work ethic? And then thirdly, what they're trying to sort of ascertain is whether you'll be a good fit. So is your work style and your personality a good match for the role and the team? So now, just as a quick sort of activity, what I'd like you to do is imagine that you are a hiring manager who is, shortlisting applicants for a graduate nursing or midwifery role. Think about the skills or the personal qualities that you would be looking for. So what do you think would make someone stand out as an applicant? And what I'd like you to do is just pop your answers in the chat. So I'll just give you a minute to do that. And then maybe, Janet, if you wouldn't mind, perhaps just reading out the answers that people have put in, or the comments that people have put in the chat.
Sure, Chris, will do. Not seeing in, oh yes, community involvement.
Yeah.
An applicant who has clearly researched the job criteria and hospital values. Reliable, dedicated and friendly. Safe in their practice. Teamwork and communication skills. And we're saying incorporated into the questions.
Okay.
Knows how to also ask for help.
Yes.
Honest and humble, willing to learn, passionate about the hospital's values and dedicated, passion for nursing, caring for others.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Thank you for putting those comments in. That's great. And I think, it is so helpful to think about it from the employer's perspective, to put yourself in their shoes. And, that will certainly help you when you are preparing your application. So, in addition to sort of researching the graduate programs and the healthcare services, it's also important to take some time for self-reflection. So, really think about why it is you're interested in, work in applying for a particular role with a particular health service. And also think about, what you do well and what it is that you can contribute to the role. So what's, the value that you're going to add to the team. And also think about your key strengths. And then reflect on, how this particular opportunity aligns with your long-term career aspirations. So asking yourself, these types of questions will help you to create, a more authentic and a more sort of engaging application. And it will also sort of give you a bit more confidence in, articulating your motivations and your strengths, which is something that you will actually need to do when you go for interviews. So to create a strong resume, there are 3 key elements that you need to focus on, and these are presentation, content, and tailoring. So to make a positive first impression, your resume needs to be, visually appealing. It needs to be well organized, and it must be easy to read. So it should highlight your relevant skills, your key achievements, and experiences in a really concise and impactful way. And it needs to be customized for each role. And the reason for this is that, it needs to be aligned with, the health services specific requirements and their expectations. So when it comes to, layout and design, there's not one perfect format. And unless you're in a kind of, design related field, the fonts and the visuals will be secondary to the content. And basically a good layout is about, just looking professional, being concise and drawing attention to the key information. So choose an appropriate style and be consistent with things like formatting and spacing. Make sure there's adequate spacing so that the resume can be scanned easily. without it being overcrowded or without having, sort of excessive white space. And then make the headings in each section, slightly larger in font and also bold. And typically, a resume for a new graduate is about, say, 2 to 3 pages. And the information is listed in reverse chronological order, meaning that you list your most recent activity first, and then you work backwards to older activities. And then organize the content so that it follows a logical order. And as I said, it needs to be easy to read. So don't overwhelm the reader with, too much information. Sometimes I see resumes and, the person might be using really tiny font and they've tried to cram as much information in as possible. And it's just too much. It is a little bit overwhelming. So it's better to use bullet points to summarize your experiences rather than using, really long paragraphs. Now, as a nursing student, your resume should really highlight the skills and experiences that make you a strong candidate for roles in the healthcare field. So whether you're applying for a graduate nursing program or any other healthcare related role, there are some key strategies that will help you to make your resume stand out. So firstly, before you start tailoring your resume, take the time to do your research. Research the health service you're applying to, review their website, their mission statement, and the job description to, understand their values, their patient care philosophy, and also the skills that they prioritize. And if they emphasize, teamwork and compassionate care, then make sure that you highlight your experiences that align with these qualities, because, demonstrating that you understand their needs will make your application that much stronger. In the healthcare field, employers look for specific skills like patient care, communication, teamwork, and critical thinking. So rather than sort of just, listing every skill you have, focus on the ones that align with the job that you're applying for. For example, if the role involves working in a fast-paced environment, then emphasize your ability to, multitask, to stay organized, and to remain calm under pressure. And rather than sort of simply stating that, for example, you have strong or excellent communication skills, which is often what we see as well. So we see resumes where, students may just sort of have like a bit of a shopping list and they'll write things like, excellent communication, problem solving. It's important to, be more specific, and you can say something, that demonstrates your real life experiences from things like your clinical placements or other work experience. So, for instance, instead of saying, excellent teamwork skills, you could say something like, collaborated with a multidisciplinary team during clinical placement to ensure effective patient care and treatment planning. So you need to sort of be more specific and back up what you're saying with examples or, evidence. And also try to sort of quantify your achievements where possible, because using numbers can demonstrate your impact. So for instance, instead of saying that you provided patient care, you could be more specific and say that, you assisted in the care of up to 10 patients per shift during clinical placement, something like that. So this gives potential employers a clearer idea of the scope of your experience. And then finally, pay attention to spelling and grammar. In healthcare, attention to detail, as you know, is critical. So your resume should really reflect that. So a resume with, spelling or grammatical errors can give the impression of carelessness, which is not a trait that employers want in a nurse or a midwife. So always proofread your resume, use spell check, and consider having someone else read your resume, get someone else to review it to make sure that it is polished and it is professional. So really taking the time to tailor your resume will significantly increase your chances of being shortlisted for an interview. So in terms of how you order the sections of your resume, a general principle is to prioritize information according to its relevance. So put the most important and relevant information on the first page. So think of this as being, the prime real estate. If hiring managers look at the first page and they don't see anything that grabs their attention, then they'll just start scanning and skipping around and trying to find something that's more compelling. And if the content doesn't hold their interest, what they're going to do is they're going to just move on to the next resume. So this is why it's really important to focus on the most relevant information first, and just to put that, front and center. So with your personal details, it's best to use, just your name in the heading. So use a larger font and bold lettering. There's no need to include, the word resume or CV, which stands for curriculum vitae, anywhere in the heading, because, it's quite obvious what this document is, and it's just a waste of space. So just use your name and include your contact details. So, make sure that you include a phone number and your email address, and check whether, it's preferable to have your student or your personal email. I'm guessing it might be your personal email, because if they need to contact you at a later date and you no longer have your student email address, then, it's going to be better to have your personal email on there. You can also include, your residential address, but it's optional. And then remember that employers will be using these details to contact you. So make sure that your email address and your voicemail greeting are professional, which means, it's better to avoid any silly voicemail greetings. Now, at the beginning of your resume, you can include a professional profile. And this is basically, a summary of your skills and experience. And it's really designed to give prospective employers a snapshot of your key selling points. And the summary can take different forms. So, you might have a short paragraph with a few sentences, or you might have a few bullet points. And the information that you include will depend on your situation. So for some people, it makes sense to focus on clinical skills, and for others, the focus might be on, say, relevant industry experience or, key accomplishments. You may also want to include something about your career interests if you feel that is going to be relevant. So on this slide, you'll see an example of a professional profile. So here it says, compassionate and dedicated nursing student with experience in acute care settings and 3 years as a professional care attendant. Adept at building respectful relationships with elderly residents and their families. Proven ability to collaborate effectively in a team environment and communicate calmly and empathetically with patients and other healthcare professionals. So, you don't want it to be too wordy. Now, in the education section, you'll include the name of your degree, the institution, and the date that you commenced your course, and also the anticipated completion date. And you can also include details of previous studies, particularly if they're healthcare related. So, for example, if you've done a course at TAFE, it is optional to include your high school details. It's probably not the most important thing, but, of course, you can add that. And certainly if you've got, any accomplishments attached to that. So, for example, if you were the Ducks of your school, or if you were a school captain, of course, put that information in there as well, because, that demonstrates skills like leadership. But please don't include details like primary school information. I know that might sound funny, but we do see resumes sometimes where primary school details are listed. Employers are really not going to be interested in that. And then you might be asked to include information about your placement. So again, this is a way to demonstrate your relevant skills. So this is one way that you might present your placement experience, but please check for any guidelines that are offered by the health service that you're applying to, just in case they have given, specific instructions on how they want your placement to be presented in your resume.
Chris, there's a question that says, is it better to keep it to placement specific, or can you use examples with your current job as well to demonstrate skills?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And we are going to come to that. So there is another section that you can include, but yes, definitely. It is important to include any experience that highlights your relevant skills. So you can have a section on work experience. So, and it can be effective to sort of divide your work experience into two different sections or categories. So, for example, if you have a mix of healthcare experience and then also other work experience that's not healthcare related, you can use headings like, relevant experience and other experience or other employment. So you can sort of divide it in this way. And this helps employers to quickly identify, the experiences you've had that directly align with the role that you are applying for. So you can list your experience. List your experience in reverse chronological order. So starting with the most recent job and then working backwards. So include details like, your position title, the name of the organisation, and the month and the year that you commenced. And also, if you've finished up with that role, also put the time or the month and the year that you finished your employment. And then also include information about things like your key responsibilities and achievements. And again, quantify these if you can. So, for example, you might say something like, you supervise 5 junior staff members. And even if, the other work experiences you've had, don't relate to the healthcare industry, it is important to, still include that experience and highlight the transferable skills that you developed through that other work experience. So, you might not go into as much detail with that other employment, but where you can, focus on those aspects of it that do highlight your transferable skills. So think about, skills like teamwork, communication, resilience, and, like the ability to work under pressure and to be organised, because that's definitely relevant to the nursing profession. And you can also include things like volunteer work, because, this can be really valuable. And the reason is that, volunteer roles can involve tasks and responsibilities that are transferable to professional settings. And second, this also gives, employees insights into your character, into your, values, and to your commitment to things like social responsibility. And also including volunteer work on your resume demonstrates that you are someone who is interested, in giving back to your community and supporting, causes that you care about. And these are values that may be a really good fit for the organisation or with the organisation that you're applying to. And it's something that, can help you stand out as well. So just remember that everyone else who's applying for these roles, everyone's done placement, but not everyone has done, something like volunteering. So that could be a point of difference for you. And you can present your volunteer experience in a similar way to your employment history. So, include things like, if you had a particular title, job title, the organisation that you did the volunteering work with, the dates, and also specific duties and, sort of any outcomes that you achieve. And of course, you can include things like extracurricular activities. So this might be involvement in, student clubs and societies. It could be, sporting activities. It could be mentoring and student representative roles, just to name a few. And as with volunteering, most employers, value these experiences because they demonstrate that, you are someone who is motivated. And also it sort of shows them that you are someone who's, like a well-rounded individual. And again, you can present this information in the same way as your employment. So, provide enough detail for the employer or the hiring manager to understand, what you've contributed to the club or the team or the program and the skills that you have developed through that experience. And when you're, writing about your experiences, it's really important to take ownership of your actions and achievements. And, it's important to use an active rather than a passive voice. So this is why it's really good to, use lots of descriptive words in your resume. So use those active, verbs. So using this kind of active voice tells the employer that you are someone who does take action, that you solve problems, that you achieve results, and it also makes your resume sound a lot more confident. So we do have a list of like these descriptive words or action verbs on Career Hub, but you can Google it easily enough as well, and it can be really handy to have that list with you when you're developing your resume and your cover letter. And then include any extra training or short courses that you've completed, because again, this demonstrates, your commitment to ongoing professional development, and it shows your motivation. So just make sure that they are relevant. So for instance, I probably wouldn't, like if you've done an RSA course, you might not want to put that on there because it's not, so relevant to nursing. But anything else that you've done, in addition to sort of the core components of your course, you can certainly add that as well. Now, with your applications for the graduate programs, you do need to include 2 clinical referees as part of the application. And they need to be, people who have worked closely with you in your capacity as a student nurse or midwife. And who can provide an informed opinion about your suitability for the role. So they do need to be a registered nurse or midwife with more than 1 year's professional experience. So examples include, a nurse midwife unit manager, a clinical nurse midwife consultant, a clinical nurse midwife educator, a clinical facilitator, a clinical support nurse or midwife, and a clinical preceptor. So for the GNMP match, if you're not able to supply a second referee from a student placement, you can nominate a nurse or midwife unit manager or a clinical nurse midwife educator or clinical supervisor, when you were, say, a RUSON or RUSON. And as I said before, make sure that you ask your referees for permission before you nominate them. And it's not just a matter of professional courtesy, but you also want to make sure that they are willing to do the report and that they are available at the specified time to complete the report. This is really important. And you need to obtain certain information from them. So when you are listing them, make sure you include, their title, their first and last name, their preferred email address, their current job title, and the health service that they're working for. So this information really does need to be accurate. And then, I think it's best to sort of apply early. And I mentioned this before, just to give your referees, lots of time to submit their reports. But also keep in mind that you do need to follow up. So it is your responsibility to check that the report has been submitted by your referees. And if it hasn't, you need to follow up with them. Now, some health services may request more than the 2 required referees as part of their own application. So remember, it's a 2-step process. So these referees reports need to be, written by the referee, and they need to be submitted directly to the health service. So just check the requirements for the individual health services. Now, on Career Hub, you can access online tools to help you tailor your resumes and prepare for interviews. So go to Career Hub and click on the Career Ready Assist tab, which will take you to the big interview platform. So that's just recently been launched this year. So on the platform, there's a tool called Resume AI, and that features like a resume builder. So if you need help getting started, you can use the resume builder. And this sort of template allows you to add your details, and it uses AI to generate, different sections of your resume. And then once you've done that, you can also upload your resume to get instant feedback on, things like its readability, its credibility, and its format. So, this helps you to improve, those key areas to make sure that your resume does stand out to recruiters, and also will help you to sort of get through any like applicant tracking systems or automated systems that some organizations use. So yeah, please check that out if you haven't seen it yet. All right, so I'm just keeping an eye on the time here. Do we have any other questions about resumes before we go on to talk about cover letters?
We don't have any in the chat at the moment, Chris.
Okay, no worries. We'll push on then. Thanks, Janet.
Oh, actually, sorry, there is
that's
one.
all right. Yeah, sure.
Does the referee only need to do one referee report for all 4 healthcare providers?
Yes. Yes. So sorry, for the GNMP match, they will just need to do one report. But if it is for the individual health services, so again, remember that there's 2 parts to it. They may need to, create a report that's specific to that health service. So that's just something that you will need to check.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, so now we're going to have a look at cover letters. So as I said, not all health services will ask for a cover letter, but if they do, it's good to sort of, start thinking about what you're going to include, and maybe, have a draft prepared that you can tweak for the different health services. So essentially, the purpose of a cover letter is to demonstrate, your strong interest in the role and the organisation. So, employers want to hire candidates who are genuinely interested in working for them. So that's something to really keep in mind. So make sure that you do your research and explain why this particular health service appeals to you. It also needs to show how you meet the selection criteria. So focus on the skills and attributes that are specified in the job description. So in your response to the selection criteria, provide some brief examples of how you've developed or applied your skills to achieve positive outcomes. And then it also demonstrates your sound written communication skills. So the cover letter needs to use, professional language, and it needs to have well-structured paragraphs. So make sure that you proofread your cover letter carefully, and, make sure that there are no spelling or grammatical errors. So just a few sort of key points to remember when you're writing the cover letter. So firstly, keep it concise. So limit the cover letter to 1 page, and that might be about 4 or 5 paragraphs. So, just always remember that hiring managers are really busy people, so they do appreciate cover letters that are clear and to the point. Include your contact details, and also include the contact details of, the person that you need to address the cover letter to. So that's usually the program coordinator. And make sure that you tailor each letter to avoid, making it sound, sort of generic. If you want your resume to stand out, then you need to customize the content for the specific job. And then, having said that, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to, start a letter from scratch every single time. Often it's just about making some small adjustments. So it might be, reordering the content or, aligning your wording with the organization's values and, key skills, and that will be enough. So it doesn't mean that you have to start from scratch every single time. And then, most importantly, focus on how your skills and experience will benefit the employer. It's not just about why the job interests you. So you need to flip that around and highlight how you will add value. So that's really important. So, sometimes we will see cover letters and the candidate will really focus a lot on what they're hoping to get out of it and why it's going to be good for their career. And that's not the tone that you want to take. It's really about saying, this is how I will contribute to your team and your organization, and this is how I'm going to make a positive impact. So that's the approach that you want to take. And of course, don't be afraid to show your personality. Demonstrate your enthusiasm and, your motivation and your genuine interest because, this makes your application a lot more engaging. So here are some examples of what to include in each paragraph. So the opening paragraph should briefly, introduce you to the employer, explain the purpose of your letter and, state the role that you're applying for and also where you saw the role advertised, which in this case will usually be the health services website. So you might write something like, dear so-and-so, I'm writing to express my strong interest in the graduate nurse program at, say, Alfred Health. As a final year nursing student at La Trobe University, I'm enthusiastic about the opportunity to join your team and apply my nursing skills to achieve positive patient outcomes. And it is important to address the cover letter to the right person. So avoid using a generic greeting like to whom it may concern, because this can come across as really impersonal. So, try to use the person's name if you can find it. And again, usually that will be listed on the organization's website. Or if their name hasn't been listed, at least use an appropriate job title. And if you're unsure, go through the instructions again, the application instructions. And then, you can even contact the health service directly to get, that information. So in the middle paragraphs, you want to explain, why you're interested in this specific program and organization. So this is definitely about the why. Show your genuine interest in the health service and its patients by demonstrating your understanding of what it is that sets this particular, health service apart from other, similar organizations. Show you've done your research by including details like, their mission statement, their values, any specialist areas or, their program structure. And you may also want to highlight your interest in a particular clinical area as well. So consider linking your motivation for applying to your future or your motivation for applying for this role to your future, career goals and the opportunities available for professional growth. So if, you have also completed a placement at the hospital, then, reflect on how that experience, was really positive and rewarding. So it could be, a few things that you mentioned there to explain why you want to, apply for the role. And, explain why this role is an ideal fit for you. So the example here is, I'm particularly drawn to the opportunity at this health service because of its reputation for delivering comprehensive patient-centered care. Its dedication to excellence in healthcare outcomes, along with a strong focus on continuous learning and professional development, closely aligns with my values and career aspirations. I'm especially inspired by the health services mission to provide exceptional care to diverse patient populations, and I'm eager to contribute my skills and experience to support and enhance its commitment to high quality healthcare. And then you also need to provide, clear examples of how your qualifications and your experience align with the selection criteria. So you can draw on different experiences. So, that could be clinical placements, it could be paid employment in healthcare roles, it could be volunteering, etc., to demonstrate your fit for the role, your suitability. And this really should be the most detailed section of your cover letter. And, if it's necessary, you might divide it into a couple of paragraphs to make sure that it flows well and that it's easy to read. So I won't go through the whole thing there. So you'll have a copy of the slides, so you can read through that a bit more carefully later on. And then you want to, end your letter on a positive note. So you can reiterate, your relevant strengths and, why you're a strong candidate for the role. And that you might also want to sort of mention your availability for an interview, or you may want to, refer to any documents that you've been asked to submit. So, you may refer to a resume or an academic transcript. But essentially, you're not introducing any new information here. It's just, finishing off the letter on a positive and a confident note. So do keep it really concise. Okay, so just a few takeaways before we finish up. So as I said before, make sure you jump onto the GNMP website. Go through all of the information there because there is a lot covered, so that you have a clear understanding of what's required. Do your research on the health services and their programs. Customize your resume and your cover letter to match their requirements. And make sure that you give concrete examples. So don't just make general statements, because this is what employers will be looking for. They'll want to know that you've done your research, that you understand the role requirements, and to show them that, you need to include some good examples, some strong examples of your skills. And then make sure you use that active voice so that it sounds engaging as well, and it demonstrates your impact that you've had in previous roles. And then, of course, make sure you do your that you do proofread these documents. Don't, you don't want to have any sort of silly errors. And keep in mind there are so many applicants, hiring managers will look for any reason to try and eliminate candidates, and it could be for the smallest reason. So just make sure that, you don't have any sort of, that you avoid those potential errors. All right. So I am going to just stop my share. So let me just, I don't know where that is. That's gone now. So hang on, there it is, stop share. There we go. And I'll just open up the chat to see if we have any other questions, or feel free to unmute yourself if you've got any questions. I'm just going through that now.
Yes, Chris, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So, I took a leave of absence last year, and I'm not due to complete my next placement until June, like during the match application period. How do I go about references? Because I obviously want to wait until I finish that placement, or would I ask previous placements?
Look, I'm not too sure about that, Christy. So I think it would be a good idea to speak to your lecturers
Yep. Yep.
about that. But there might be some, like have a look at the FAQs as well on the
Yep. Yep.
GNMP website just to see if there's, something relevant on there.
Yep, no dramas. Because I was just thinking the ones from 2023 might have forgotten me.
Yeah, true. And you want
Yes,
to, yeah, and you want to choose the ones who will be the best references for you.
I know, and recent too, I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
yes,
Yep,
yes,
yep. All right,
exactly.
I'll look
Yeah,
into it. Thank
yep,
you.
no worries, no worries. Okay. Are there any other questions there? So let me just go back into the chat. So just
Yes, there's a question. Can the 2 referees come from different placement facilities?
yeah, so they should, yes. Yes. So the referees just need to be like um, um, as I mentioned earlier, people who have supervised you or who can comment on your work performance. So that can be from a couple of different placements, as long as they sort of meet the other criteria. Does that sort of answer your question?
I'm not sure. Yes,
Yes,
there's a thank you there.
no worries, no worries. And of course, as I said, talk to your lecturers about this and go along to, information sessions that the health services run. So some of those sessions will be online, some of them will be in person. And then again, go onto the GNMP website because there is a lot of information there. So they do, especially the candidate handbook. So that will give you some, clear instructions on, say, who you can have as referees.
I'm in a similar situation to Christy with my placements. But I've had my last placement, the educator is happy to be referenced for me, but there was a midwife who I worked with like nearly every second day. Like, is it okay if I ask her as well? Because I won't be able to get one from my next one. Like, is that okay if they're from the same, or does that look a bit dodge?
Well, look, I think that should be okay. But as I said, I think it would be best just to check.
Yeah.
So I guess we're not the experts with the sort of the match process itself and also the applications.
Yeah.
But again, if she meets, the criteria for who can be a referee, then that should be fine, Abby.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so I think we're sort of we've come to the end of the question, so we might wrap up the session. So if you haven't completed the attendance form, please make sure that you do that. And then also, if you could complete the feedback form, we'd really appreciate that. Or if you've got any suggestions for how we might be able to improve next time, that would be great as well. Good luck with your applications, and please also, if you haven't registered for next week's workshop, you can register online on Career Hub to do that. Hopefully we see a lot of you next week. All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.